What's up, guys? Derek, moreplatesmoredates.com. Today I'm going to be reacting to Lee Priest's steroid cycle from the 90s that he went over with Tom Platz. Obviously really insightful, gives an inside look into what, top pros with top 0.0001% genetics were doing in the 90s to achieve their physiques. And obviously, guys could be lying, but I don't see any reason to lie other than to downplay how much of an abuser you seem like. I don't know. To me, these interviews were supposed to be every bodybuilder except Lee Priest opted to stay anonymous, and Lee just he was the only one that didn't care and just went didn't blur his face out or change his voice or anything like that in the post-production to hide who he is. So I'm pretty sure he's probably telling the truth. I don't know. Anyways, I'm just going to start it, and you guys can be the judge, and I'll comment along the way.
My first question, basically, would be, what situation in your life or what specific circumstance brought you to the need or the feeling or desire that, what really made you feel that you had to take steroids in order to compete? Or was there a particular time in your career that you felt that that was the case?
It wasn't really like a need to or like I had to. It's more like a personal choice because I'd won a few national titles beforehand and done a few shows, and then as the level got harder, the guys were getting bigger. So it came down to more of a should I or shouldn't I, or just do it for an experiment. And I just decided I'd give it a go, take a small dosage, see how it affected me. So it wasn't like I had to because I was winning shows anyway without them beforehand, and I trained for like 5 or 6 years before I even done my first course on steroids. So it's like one of those things after competing at such a high level, I just want to go ahead and give it a go and see how they worked.
Now, you mentioned you were competing 5 or 6 years before you took steroids. So how old were you when you first started taking steroids?
I was 19.
19? Since we're...
See, a lot of guys think he started way younger than that. They think he started at 16, and interesting to hear him say 19. I don't know if it's truthful or not. I see no reason why he would lie, though. So, other than the obvious, trying to downplay your use. But, I don't know. Lee, to me, doesn't seem like the kind of guy who would lie about it. He's, a lot shorter, so muscle packs on a lot easier, or it appears to anyways. So, 5 pounds on him is going to look like what 20 pounds looks like on a really tall guy. So, is it completely unorthodox to think that somebody could have looked the way he did at 18, 17 naturally? Honestly, I have no idea because I have nowhere near the genetics of this guy, so I'm not really sure. Only he knows for sure, but anyway.
So we're speaking about steroids at this point. What specific steroids do you find effective in your training?
I've always stuck to the basic, like Deca was the very first one I used when I was 19 and put on 20. I did a 6-week course on it. That's all I used, like 2 cc's a week. I found I put on 20 pounds. Yeah, sure you carry some water weight.
So that's probably like, I guess depending on the concentration of Deca at the time, maybe anywhere from 200 to 600 milligrams a week, approximately. I don't really know. Like, obviously quantifying in cc's isn't like a way of measuring when the varying concentrations, but these guys were using, I'm assuming, pharma stuff back then, or most of it was probably more so pharma than UGL. I don't really know, to be honest, but it could be anywhere from 100 milligrams per milliliter up to 300 milligrams per milliliter, just educated guess. I'm going to say probably taking like 400 milligrams a week in this, cycle reference.
With that, but then even now I stick to the basics like Deca, Prima Bowl, and I don't like test it or stay away from testosterones, but they're just the basics like that. So I've never really delved into the science. Some guys like stacking 6 or 7, but I've always and always 2.
So the interesting thing about that, he's talking about how he likes Nandrolone is a 19 nor, and then you have Primobolan DHT derivative, and he doesn't have any androstenedione in his preferable cycle whatsoever. Like, he has nothing that's aromatizing heavily into estrogen, which is, maybe I'm sure he'll delve into it more, so I'm just going to continue. Interesting, though.
Like, in terms of some of the drugs you just mentioned, steroids you just mentioned, specific dosages, could you give us some idea of what specific dosages you use prior to a show and how long you use these dosages?
I'm getting ready for a contest. I normally start dieting 12 weeks out, so I'll start with maybe like Steroid, which is the same as Winstrol. I'll take like 2 cc's every 3 days. Then sometimes I get sick of taking a needle, so I might increase it to every 4 or 5 days. So I hate being a pin cushion. And then I was taking 1 Anadrol 50 a day because like they're one of the worst on your liver, so I hate using them. But yet for keeping the size and strength, they're good. But I only take 1 a day of them. Now I was taking 2 IUs of growth hormone every day for the last 6 weeks, and then just Nolvadex. Okay.
So to a lot of people, this cycle probably makes no sense, but it's like back in the day, you have to understand there's no internet, there's no like cycle theory, there's no like anything really except for a few random like underground encyclopedias of bodybuilding written by, you know, random dudes who theorize about stuff. And so he's talking about using Winstrol like, what do you say, every 3 days or something, when it has a half-life of, you know, obviously it's going to be in and out of your system pretty quick. And then 50 milligrams of Anadrol per day, 2 IUs of GH, which is not a significant amount. If you're using pharma, that might put you at like, I don't know, like 300 IGF, which isn't like that far out of range. It's not like crazy high or anything. And then he's talking about Nolvadex here, which I'm assuming he just uses as antagonize estrogen and the receptor to dry out a bit before a show, but I'll just let him continue before I comment.
That's about all. Getting ready for a contest.
Okay. So how about in the off season then? Would you take
off season? I don't use too much. It's more like I rely more on food and heavy training. Like I normally go like maybe 5 months before I do another course in the off season. Then I'll just take the basic like Deca, 2 cc's of Deca, and 2 cc's of Prima for 8 weeks. Then I might go off it for another 3 months before I do something else. So I've never really been a big believer. Like in, you know, people get the mentality where you need steroids to grow, you need steroids for this. But if you get that in your mentality, then they can't.
So growth phase, I guess he only uses around 400 Deca and a couple hundred Primo. I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell based on, you know, varying concentrations. I have no idea what the concentration is of what he's using. So when he refers to cc's, I'm just going to assume based on what most of those products are dosed at per milliliter. So let's continue.
About them. Whereas I might just use them for like an assistance rather than rely on them. That's why at contest time I might take a little bit more because I'm doing more training, I'm doing more cardio. So like even with dieting, you cut your food back, so recovery becomes harder. So the drugs mainly help me more for recovery than anything.
Is there a certain time during the year, you mentioned it was 4 months prior to a show, you start getting ready?
Normally 3 to 4 months before a contest I'll start preparing. And then I'll start, as soon as I start my diet and start restricting the food, I'll just start on 1 steroid like stanozol, get the size and strength, I'm cutting back calories. Then maybe like 6 weeks before the show, that's when I start the growth hormone. And then like 8 weeks I'll put the Anadrol in, 8 weeks before the show. I just slowly, I don't take them all at once from the beginning, I just slowly start on one, then increase the other. And as the show gets near, I start tapering off them again.
Well, it brings up a point prior to the show.
So his pre-contest stack is more or less Winstrol, I guess injectable Winstrol, which is obviously far more efficacious than oral, at least in practical application from what I've seen. 50 milligrams of Anadrol. I don't know if he's like titrating up or what the deal is. It's kind of ambiguous here, but it sounds like pretty mild doses of Winstrol, Anadrol, and a couple IUs of GH. That's nothing crazy. That's nothing crazy whatsoever compared to what most guys are doing.
Do you stop taking steroids completely at a certain point, or do you continue steroids through the show?
Normally a week or two before I'll stop them. I'm just so sick of taking them anyway because I don't really feel, sometimes my stomach feels sick when I'm on them and you know, I can't sleep sometimes, so I just look forward to stop taking the needles. So the sooner the better for me, because if the show comes close, I just can't wait to get off them. So normally like a week or two before I'll stop them altogether.
Depending upon the number of shows, I guess you enter per year will determine how long you're on steroids for that year. Is there any specific time you don't take steroids, or a number of months, weeks that you don't take steroids at all during the year?
Normally, when I do my contests, I try to group them all together so the shows are pretty close together. But then, like after a show, like a big show I did last year, I didn't touch them again for like 7 months. I just went totally off them. I had like maybe a shot of Deca twice because I had like sore elbows, so mainly just for the joints I took 2 shots of Deca, but that was about it for the whole 7 months.
So your doses are actually quite low.
He makes probably anyone feel like a drug abuser because his doses are so mild. I don't know if he's telling the truth for sure, but again, I see no reason why he would make this up other than I have no idea. Like, I don't think he really cares, to be honest.
Compared to what I think people think about.
Very little. I've read magazines where they say, you know, guys use it, professionals use these large amounts, and we just sit there and we laugh about it. You know, we read it. You know, we spend 40,000 a year, 50,000 to get ready for a contest, and it's like, you know, bodybuilders. You know, people say we're dumb, but we're not that stupid. It's like, you know, if the prize money's 10,000, who's going to spend 50,000 to get ready for a contest? So.
Yeah. Well, in fact, one of the guys I was talking to earlier mentioned that you know, sometimes 15 on or up to 50 and even $100,000 a year, and that's you don't do anything like that.
I can tell you from my past experience, my last show I did, a big contest, I didn't spend any more than $2,000. That's only because I started using a bit of growth hormone, which I've never used prior to 2 years ago. But before then, I wouldn't spend any more than $600 to get ready for a show.
Do you find the growth hormone to be the magic substance that it's touted to be?
Not really. It's like people say it's a wonder drug, but before I started using it, you know, I'd come in great shape, I'd come in hard and full. And I started using it, I'm not sure whether, because I'm growing too each year I'm like 10 pounds heavier. So it's like whether, you know, come contest time I might be a bit fuller on stage, whether that's from the growth or not, because I've come in shape without it and I've come in shape with using it. So whether it just adds to help keep that size, I'm not sure. So it's hard to say, because when you're using the growth, you're using other ones with it. So it's hard to say whether the growth is doing anything. You probably have to take the growth by itself to see whether it did anything or not, because if you're mixing drugs together, it's hard to say what's working, what isn't working. So.
True. Have you taken the by itself?
No,
okay.
I haven't, sir.
How about insulin? Is that something that goes along with GH?
I've never tried. I know a lot of guys that do, but to me, you know, I've spoken to a doctor before, and he says for the small difference it makes, it's not worth the risk. You know, you become a diabetic. Some people take too much and go into comas. So for me, like the risk and that, it's not worth it. So I never really messed around with insulin.
Like, to me, this is so indicative of somebody who just has insane genetics, because it's almost like he obviously like somewhat knows what he's talking about. Obviously, I'm not like, who am I to critique what he's saying, but just the way he describes the mechanism of drugs and like what would happen if you took insulin and whatnot, like it's pretty obvious that this guy is just a hyper responder to whatever he takes, and you know, obviously very cautious as well. But I mean, it's like his everyone's knowledge is pretty limited, I would assume, in the 90s about what stuff actually does. But the fact that he like barely touches GH, hasn't done insulin, low doses of gear, it's like this guy's pretty much like running baby cycles year round, and he's massive. It just goes to show genetics. And I've done a video on this before about not taking advice from guys with top tier genetics, and it's because of stuff like this. Because it's like, if a guy who responds to this is going to try and get a guy with average genetics to grow, it's probably not going to work out, because his knowledge is limited to the scope of just insane hyper responding to everything that he does.
Well, did you have any scary episodes with things you may have taken?
One time I brought some contaminated stuff, you know, because you know, once it's been pushed to the black market, you get guys out there who'll bottle anything to sell. The steroids had some stuff that was contaminated and got blood poisoning, so I sort of in bed for a week and couldn't walk.
Okay, so obviously it does buy underground UGL stuff. Obviously I wasn't around in the 90s to like see what the UGL scene was like, but you know, obviously there was stuff going around back then talking about getting contaminated product and whatnot.
You know, I had to take antibiotic, get shots for that, so stuff like that sort of makes you scared if you're buying stuff off the black market or stuff from different people, because it can be anything. They could be selling cooking oil for all you know, or the stuff could be put together in someone's dirty room, so stuff like that always scares you, because it does happen. There was a case a couple of years ago where a guy died because he thought he was using growth hormone, but it was actually insulin. Someone sold him insulin too much and went into a coma and died. So people do anything to make money these days, so it's always scary.
I guess you got to be careful upon, you know, where your sources
exactly,
are.
so. But you know, the stuff I got came from a friend, so yeah, but he could get off somebody else, so it's a risk you take, I guess, when you do any sport, really. So you know, whether you're a car driver, whatever, you can hop into a car and race around and get killed. So it's just one of those things. You know, it's luck of the draw. Sometimes it's going to be bad, sometimes it'll be good, but you know, if you get the bad stuff, you know, it can kill you straight away.
I mean, other than getting impure products or bogus products or counterfeit products, are there anything? How do you feel about the whole sport in general as far as the steroid issue? Is it something you wasn't there, or it is there and you just tolerate?
Sometimes you wish it wasn't there, but it's like, I guess with any sport it's going to be there. It's just that sometimes bodybuilding is like the poster child for steroid use. You know, footballers use it, you know, the Chinese swim team used it. Like any sport you go for, everyone uses it. Just because bodybuilding looks so different, we get pointed at the most as being big users because, you know, people that use steroids don't look like us. They're like, well, they must be using more, they must be taking more. You know, but it's like, at CSI, just accept it, you know. You've got the choice. If you don't want to use it, you don't have to use it. You know, there's shows out there to compete in where you don't have to use it, but if you're good enough without it, you can compete with guys that use it. Well, more luck to you. So it's one of those things going to have a preference. You know, you can tell people the bad effects, you can tell them the good effects. It's like drinking or smoking. You're going to make your own choice whether you want to use it or not. You know, your parents say, I don't want you ever touching it, and yet a kid will go and use it anyway. That comes down to personal preference on if you want to try it, you can. If not, well, don't do it.
How about other items or drugs like diuretics? Is there something that you feel works in terms of bodybuilding application?
Well, I think they do work because, you know, get a little bit of water you got left, but then too there's some out there like Lasix I tried and I felt like near death trying Lasix, just like took everything out of me. But they've got some milder ones out there where you can use them which spares potassium, which I find work well, but even now they've got natural herbal lyrics I've experimented with, and the herbal ones sometimes work just as good. Sure, they're not exactly as great, but yet they do the same job without the serious side effects, you know, where you're draining all the minerals out of your body, because you're at a fine state anyway, your body fat's down, you hardly got no minerals left in your body, and if you just drain everything out, that's where a lot of the deaths come from, because you just drain everything out and you have a heart attack or just shut down.
Yeah, it's definitely true. Like, anytime I've seen a freak accident in bodybuilding, like through, you know, personal friends or just through the grapevine, people in the local bodybuilding circuit or whatever, it's been like, in terms of a dire health situation, it's been either accumulation of gear use over the course of several, you know, decades or several years that leads to cardiovascular disease, stroke, heart attack, whatever. But like the only instant like going from healthy to like pretty much dying that I've seen is through diuretic misuse. And that's why you gotta be really careful about who you get as a coach, and just taking advice from random people on the internet or taking advice from random coaches who you have no idea if they really know what they're doing or not. Like, I don't even really have advice for how to go about finding somebody credible or not, other than getting one vetted to you through people you trust in your social circle or something like that. Because when it comes to diuretic use, like, I have a close friend who actually had a heart attack from diuretic misuse pre-contest, and he was, you know, he's my age, and he had like he was sent to the hospital and almost died, and he was like 25 years old at the time. So you gotta be really careful about that stuff, because it's you can literally just throw your electrolyte balance off so badly and just like screw up your heart to the degree where it's not even pumping correctly, electrical circuits aren't getting around your body correctly, everything's thrown out of whack, and you can't really correct it. Like, you're just taking shots in the dark thinking you know how to pull water and fill out and pull water and fill up and do this and do that and like dry out and hard it up. But, you know, it's so easy to throw everything off and send yourself to the ER. So be really careful about that stuff. And what he just said there, where the herbal stuff over the counter like works really well too. Like, yeah, things like dandelion root, if you're lean enough for a show, that like you shouldn't need like Lasix or something. Like, granted, obviously at like a top bodybuilding level, I have no idea, to be honest. But from what I've seen, if you have no body fat on your body, I don't think you need to, unless you're competing at like a super high level, I don't think you need to be messing with things like Lasix, things like aldactone's terrible, and things like other diuretics that just are, you know, too risky to mess with unless you like 100% know what you're doing. So
what kind of dosages have you taken of some of the diuretics in terms of the
I use like the aldactone or aldactazide. I just take like half of one maybe 2 days before a show, or like maybe a 20 milligram one, then the night before a show I'll take a whole one. So you don't really need high amounts of diuretics for them to work. So just that, you know, if you've been cutting back your water.
Aldactone's like the worst diuretic ever, by the way. It's used as an anti-androgen for women who are, or men who are transitioning from male to female, and it's just poor. I don't think that it's very effective pre-contest, and it usually just flattens guys out and prevents them from filling back up, from messing with aldosterone and reuptake of everything. And it's just I don't know, the only thing that I've seen work well that wasn't too risky to mess with is Diazide personally. And then, ideally you would just get lean enough and you don't even need to use a diuretic at all. But, obviously at a high level, there's things these guys are doing that I guess is a necessity for them to show up the way they need to. But the likelihood that you need to even touch a diuretic ever is very low. So just, be careful with them, because those are the things that are going to kill you instantly.
For 3 or 4 days before a show, and then you take it, excuse me, that might drain everything you've got, but I always keep my fluid high.
Regarding diuretics, it's so sometimes you use herbals and sometimes you would use the aldactone or the aldactazide.
Yeah.
But it seems like, from what I hear you saying, it's like you use very little amounts of all the including esoteric drugs.
Well, I've always been that way since I started. I've always used small amounts. I found the small amount work. One time I did try a large amount and it made no difference in the small amount. So ever since then, I've always just stuck to the small amount, because if you start using large amounts, the only one who's going to benefit is the guy who's selling it to you, because he's making more money because you're using it quicker. But yet, 2 cc's to me works just as good as what 10 cc's does. But
and for somebody competing at the Olympia level, for him to say this kind of stuff should be really enlightening for a lot of guys watching this, because you get into this mindset when you're trying to bodybuild that, okay, well, I built muscle at this dosage, so next cycle I have to do more to keep building muscle. And it's not always necessarily the case. Myostatin works in a regulatory way, so that if you're always on the same dose, then your body's going to have a feedback mechanism of myostatin to prevent you from gaining more, and then it puts you in a position where you probably do need to use more to continue gaining. But if you're going up and down and you're not just doing a permablast, trying to permabulk for 2 years straight, the likelihood is you can probably get away with a lot less than you think. And I fell into the trap when I was younger of being like, oh, I need at least 500 tests in there or else I won't grow. And it's like, you'd be surprised how little you can probably get away with. This guy definitely has more muscle than you, I'm assuming, definitely more, significant amount more than me. And I was using doses higher than he was at the most, at my stage of using my most. And did I need it? No, definitely not, especially for what I was trying to do. So just keep that in mind, guys, because I've actually noticed that too. Even with my TRT, at first I was on 200 a week, and then I was I wanted to see how low I could get it, because obviously 200 a week is probably not sustainable long term from a cardiovascular perspective, when that's more than therapeutic levels in terms of what my blood work showed. So, I started tapering down. Muscle didn't fall off me though, and I kept tapering down and nothing changed. I kept keeping my muscle on me. So you'd be surprised what half of what you're taking could do the exact same thing and probably have you feeling less toxic, have better blood markers, and actually increase your longevity in the sport, and long term equate to more muscle accrual.
some people get the impression, well, if I'm taking 2 cc's and I gain 20 pounds, 6 cc's I'll gain, twice that much, 3 times the amount, the more I take, but it doesn't work that way.
Well, based upon the fact you take small amounts, would this be a suggestion, not that we're in this particular video, are we making suggestions or recommendations for drug use at all? We're merely confronting the issues. But in terms of the viewers and the younger people coming up, younger guys and coming up, listening to this, your basic thoughts would be less is more.
Yeah, I've always found it better when everyone I speak to, I tell them that, but yet some people got in their mind that they need large amounts because so many people tell them, the pros take this much, the pros take that much, but yet the pros don't. Nearly every amateur I've met takes twice the amount as a pro does, but because we're bigger than they are, say they're taking 1,500 milligrams and we're bigger than them, they're thinking, well, the pro's taking 3,000 milligrams, but yet, as I said, I take maybe 200 milligrams a deca, 200 milligrams of Primus, that's milligrams a week. I get good results from that, so you don't need large amounts.
What do you say, 200 a deca and 200 a primo? Let me go back here.
Twice the amount as a pro does, but because we're bigger than they are, say they're taking 1,500 milligrams and we're bigger than them, they're thinking, well, the pro's taking 3,000 milligrams, but yet, as I said, I take maybe 200 milligrams a deca, 200 milligrams of Primus, that's milligrams a week. I get good results from that, so you don't need large amounts.
So like 400 milligrams a week of gear? Wow.
A little bit on drugs, which I'm going to use, then spend the rest of the money on food, because you know the food's going to work, so just train heavy on that. But you know, people want to get a quick fix straight away, they want to get huge overnight, but bodybuilding, building muscle takes years. So like, I'd recommend training, you know, 5 to 6 years before you even decide to use steroids. It's like,
one thing he just mentioned too that is worth noting is, that's something I've noticed too, is I used to always think, oh, the pros are doing something different, they're taking Increlex, or they're taking some secret thing, or they're taking more than everyone else. But the fact is, a lot of the amateurs are actually taking more than the pros, and the reason is their genetic response is so terrible, which is why they're stuck at regional level shows, placing, like, not even winning overalls, and they're using like 4 or 5, 6 grams of gear a week. And then there's pros using a quarter of that and getting pro cards because genetics. That's just what it comes down to. And the amateurs think, you know, they think there's a secret, and they think the secret is more and more and more, so they just keep pushing the envelope, whereas the pros are getting exactly where they want without even having to get to that point yet. So that's something I think is actually pretty common, is amateurs using more than pros, if not, you know, maybe the same amount, maybe in some cases pros more, obviously. And there's obviously health conscious amateurs who don't do that, but it's actually a pretty common scenario to have amateurs who are way overdoing it, thinking they just need to keep pushing the envelope to get, you know, finally get that like pro size that they just can't get. And it's not the case. They're just chasing a pipe dream. It's never going to happen if their genetics are, you know, inferior.
It's like, it's one of those things, you've got to build a foundation first, and then maybe if you want to experiment and try them, you know, go ahead, but, you know, don't go crazy thinking you're going to get big overnight and take large amounts, because you're probably going to end up sick or dead. You know, it's not going to make you any bigger taking a large quantity.
So you're not suggesting, or are you, that steroids are a magic form?
Far from it. Like, if you haven't got the genetics, if you haven't got the willpower or the determination upstairs, you can take all the drugs you want, you're never going to get anywhere, you know. The guys who are champions today, any sport would be there without drugs or not, you know, like Ben Johnson, he still won the race without them steroids. It's like, excuse me, it's just that, you know, he was using stenazole. Like, I used stenazole before contests. I probably took more than him, but yet I could never beat him. So the drug certainly didn't make him run fast. It's like, maybe when you look at bottles, like a bottle of stenazole, you see for animals, horses. Now a horse that's like 800 pounds more takes 2 cc's every 2 weeks. So it's like bodybuilders getting ready for shows will sometimes take 2 cc's every 2 days. And I'm thinking, like, if we're humans who weigh, you know, 200 pounds, what are we taking 2 meals every 2 days worth of horse?
Yeah. That kind of goes back to my video I did on Trenbolone, where I discussed the dosage used in cattle to beef them up and compared it to the dosages guys are using for bodybuilding purposes on like 185-pound physiques now. And that just ties in perfectly. You have guys using doses approved for vet usage in animals 10 times your size, using doses 10 times higher than the horses or the cattle are using. So that's a very logical way to put it, in my opinion, and it makes a lot of sense, you know.
Brain needs, you know, 2 meals every 2 weeks. You know, it just comes down to common sense. So
I understand that the current shows are only tested in terms of diuretics. Are there, how do you get around that? Are there masking agents, or?
Like I said, I'd start taking the herbal diuretics, but there are diuretics out there now that you can take it out of your system in 6 hours, so there's always going to be a masking agent, but then masking agents too can add to the danger, because people take more stuff to try and cover up what they're taking, which can either counteract or, you know, not mix well, or some of the counter agents can be more dangerous than the steroids themselves. So even with the diuretics, but if you stick to the herbal ones, you can do okay, but now diuretics that you can take the night before and next morning you can pee clean. So
and there's no trace of taking diuretic, I see. How about other esoteric drugs like esquiline?
I've tried esquiline like in the off-season once just to see what it did, and you know, it hurt a lot. I couldn't train properly with it, so you know, swells the muscle up, it inflamed the muscle red, so I'm thinking, what's the point, you know, for the little bit of improvement it gives you, it's not worth it. Then a couple of days later it goes away. So for a contest, people like to use it, you know, to put a little bit more height on their bicep or in their rear delt or calf, but yet it covers up all the definition. It's like, to me, it's like, if you go on stage and you're more defined, it's all an illusion on stage. You're going to look bigger anyway.
Acetylcholine something that's not really talked about in modern day. I don't know if it's like totally obsolete or if it's still used in, you know, top bodybuilding competitions or not, but basically what it does is after it's pinned, inflames the muscle from the inside and artificially creates a swollen look that, you know, can enhance lagging body parts or give a certain pop that would have otherwise been unachievable. And apparently it was really popular in the 90s, and that's what he's discussing right now. Not even sure if it's available now, but yeah, in the 90s it was pretty popular from what I can tell.
If you smooth that body part out, you know, it's just going to look sort of soft and watery, so I'd rather keep the definition, have the illusion of looking bigger, rather than trying to inject something. You know, it's like I think too, anything that you put in your body that inflames the muscle and does that to it can't be good for the body if you're inflaming it with an injection. So I tried that once and didn't like it. It hurt too much and it went all red and got hot. So it's like, it doesn't seem like a good thing to me.
Are there any specific mistakes you've ever made that you'll never do again in terms of?
Maybe, like I injected it into my calves once and then I got the blood poisoning, hit a nerve and all that sort of stuff. So
Yeah.
I normally stick to the...
There's tons of nerves in your calves, so I highly recommend avoiding them. If for some reason you wanted to pin your TRT in there or something, not a good spot. It's like one of the most nerve-dense areas of your body, so definitely avoid your calves at all costs.
Probably the buttocks area or the shoulder there, because people go through that stage where, you know, if you inject it into that muscle's going to grow bigger, but it's like, you know, people forget the buttocks is really a muscle. The glutes area is a muscle, so if that was the case, there'd be guys out there with glutes the size of a bus. Because, you know, people inject so much into it.
That's true, yeah.
It's like, it doesn't work that way, so it's like I just put in that.
That's true.
People make mistakes by trying to put in different body parts and hit nerves and do stuff like that. Then I heard of people inject it straight into their vein, which is dangerous doing that, because if you're going to inject into the vein, you've got some contaminated stuff. Well, you'll get to your heart quicker than anything, and then you're dead. So there's only just mistakes like that people will make. You know, sometimes they'll keep injecting in the same spot, and they'll get a cyst there or a boil and have to get it cut out or removed and get a lot of scar tissue. So there are bad side effects, but...
Ever happened to yourself as far as injecting in the same site?
I always keep it moving around, plus I never use large amounts in the same area. There's only guys who'll put like maybe 10 cc's in the one injection in the one spot, have this big great ball there, and because it won't break down and move through the muscle, just sits there, and then it turns into a cyst or an abscess, so they've got to get it cut out.
How about any effects like gynomastia?
I had that from a young age myself, naturally. So I had a high level of testosterone, so at the age of 13 I had one cut out naturally, so I could like excrete stuff out of my...
I already know everyone's going to say, oh, he had gyno at 13 because he was on gear then, but I don't know. It does happen where guys, they're natural, just going through puberty, spike natural testosterone, spikes aromatization levels, and can lead to gynecomastia if there's not a proper balance of, or a optimal balance of androgen to estrogen. So definitely possible, and it's well documented that pubertal, I don't even know if you'd say it like that, gyno in puberty is definitely a thing. So I wouldn't discount it entirely that it could have happened naturally. So just a comment there.
Out of my
So at 13 you had one cut out, so,
yeah. So
but you weren't taking steroids?
No, I just had a high natural level of testosterone. So it's like it just grew naturally, but I've never had them from drugs.
Well, some of the newer non-drug-like items.
That actually makes me think that that's probably why he avoids androstenedione in the first place, like testosterone, dianabol, EQ, if EQ was even used in the 90s, because clearly he has a genetic polymorphism that increases the amount of aromatization he has relative to somebody else. Because normally when people go through puberty, test and DHT spikes and the ratio of testosterone aromatizing into estrogen is still maintained, so you don't get gyno. The only way you get gyno is if you have imbalance of, you don't have enough androgen relative to your estrogen. So clearly Lee has increased genetic propensity to aromatize significantly more testosterone into estrogen, because simply having a high testosterone level doesn't indicate that you're going to get gyno. It's rather if you have a high level of aromatization, or, you know, a genetic SNP or something like that, that's going to, you know, predispose you to that, because the way you metabolize sex hormones in your body is not as, you know, efficient as another guy. So that's probably the reason he avoids testosterone to begin with. And interesting.
Items over the over-the-counter items like Andro. Have you ever experimented with those?
No, not really. In the off-season with me, I've never really been a big supplement user. I might stick with a basic protein powder.
I bet if you got a genetic test too, it would show that he has the man boob gene for sure.
Powder, maybe a carbohydrate drink, but when it comes to protein, maybe a multivitamin, but a lot of the other stuff I never really got into. As I said, I got a high natural level of testosterone anyway, so boosting it to me doesn't really do anything. When I tried testosterone once, I used cypionate, and I actually got weaker. So I actually found my natural level being as high as it was actually benefited me more than actually taking the synthetic stuff. So every time when I tried that once, my weights just went down and everything. As soon as I got off it again, my strength came back up. So.
Well, he was probably using a dosage that was lower than what he endogenously produces, like he already said, but that's just a consequence of using less exogenous hormone than you endogenously produce. So it's not like testosterone sucks necessarily. It's just that, if you suppress your endocrine function with using a dose lower than what you naturally produce, then of course you would experience a decrease in performance, strength, size, etc. So that's what I'm assuming happened anyways.
So prior to an event, it's mostly anabolic substance. None?
Not really. I hardly use any androgenics at all.
No androgenic material whatsoever?
No.
Interesting. Well, it seems like, to me, your approach to bodybuilding and drug use is reminiscent of my era when I was competing in the 80s. It was something that was like almost not as predominant, some of the guys I interviewed so far today talked about chemical warfare and $100,000 a year and the risks of insulin where you could go into comas and things. And I was like sitting there going, oh my God. I'm
more of the believer. I've always been the believer in hard training, proper nutrition. Like I said, the mental side of it, getting your mind focused. And to me, steroids are maybe like a 5%, even if that. It's more like an aid rather than, so many people rely on them as a crutch, to get them through and take them all the time, I'll be training with people like, we'll be going heavy and they can't go heavy. Like, well, I'm not on anything right now. I'm like, oh, what excuse is that? They're like, well, I'm not on drugs right now. I can't train heavy. It's like, to me, a lot of my best lifts I've been, it's like when I take drugs, I don't use them to get strong or get big. It's always like I just use them for an aid to get ready for a contest to help me recover, stuff like that. Whereas people these days, it's like more of a crutch they want to lean on. They want to take large amounts to help them train. Whereas, where I come back from before, when I started off training, it was always the hard work, the dedication. Sure, you might use a little bit of drugs, but it's just like to aid you get there. It's not going to help you make you a champion. So I just believe in the hard training more than the drug side. Whereas these days, some people want drugs before they even start training. So.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I mean, in terms of our younger viewers, or up-and-coming guys watching this tape, what would be your advice to them in terms of? You already said more is less in terms of your own approach.
It's one of those things. Like no matter what sport you're doing, try and do it your best you can without them. Then if you think you do need to use them, or you've looked into it, I would say at least 4 or 5 years on any sport. Whether it be football, running, whatever. At least try and do your best you can naturally. But then it's going to come to your personal choice if you want to use them. And then if you do use them, just suggested dose. If it's just suggested dose is 1 cc, just take that. And it will probably work for you. That's what I've always found. I've always just stuck to what I've felt worked for me. Whereas people have come up to me and said, Lee, you should be taking. You should be taking this and that, and
all right, we'll get that up.
Okay. But then they'll say you should be taking, 1,500 milligrams. But I'm like, why? I said, 200 milligrams works. Why take any more? But people mainly take more because it's more hideous, say more than anything. They hear this guy's taking that, they hear this guy's taking this, and they won't keep. Well, if he's taking, I'd better take it to keep up with him. But yet, you don't need to. If the small amount works, stick to it. But it always comes down to, like when someone does their first course. Personally, they don't know themselves, but they're too scared to ask their doctor, or someone around them doesn't know, so they might ask the gym who's using, tons of drugs, what should I take? And that guy will say, well, take 1,000 milligrams of this, take 5 of these, take some of this. So their first course, they start off on this large amount, and from then on, all they use is large amounts, large amounts. If they had to start off on a small amount, they'd find they get the same gains as the large amount, but yet their mind's now set on this large amount. They've got to keep taking more and more if they want to get bigger and bigger, which is the case.
So what do you account for the reason we're seeing such tremendously large physiques on the stage today? When I was competing in the 80s, you're over 200 pounds, and in the 70s, you're over 200 pounds, you're big. Now, you guys are getting close to 300 and 3% body fat.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's still, maybe genetics of people coming along.
Okay.
Maybe nutrition's changed a bit, like, back in the early days it was more of the higher fat foods and the milks and this, but now it's more the diets are changing and then even training's changing. But, probably just kind of genetics, different body types coming through and that, whereas even back then you had the freaks back then for the day and age, but now it's like, maybe if you guys were training now, you too would probably look the way some of the guys do now. So that's one of those things that might be, I can't really say drugs because drugs have been there for a long time too.
I don't think that's accurate. I think, one, the population increases substantially every year, so obviously there's going to be more genetic outliers with freakish genetics as the years progress. But in addition, having more drugs more readily available and just having higher dosages being used, in addition to things like GH and insulin, which weren't around in the 70s, I think that accounts for the freak factor in the 90s versus the 70s and 80s. I don't think it's a coincidence that when GH and insulin became, abused in the 90s, that all the freaks started coming out, and as well as mega doses of all anabolics. Like, I'm sure back in the 70s, it sounds like you would have to go to your doctor and ask for a certain amount to be prescribed to you, and then that's what you would be limited to. But in the 90s, there's underground labs and whatnot, and you can have access to however much you want. So if you just wanted to abuse stuff, then it's more readily available and easier to get. Plus, there's other things that can blow you up into another dimension that just weren't available in the 70s. So I think that's more so what accounts for it, because I don't think the guys trained any harder in the 90s than the guys did in the 70s, nor do I think they ate significantly better. It's the same kind of food that's around. The only thing that seems to be different is more genetic outliers, probably due to population and the drugs. That's what I would think.
They've always been as short as got the more growth hormone now and that, but I don't think growth's a wonder drug that's going to add that much muscle, make someone 40, 50 pounds heavier than they would have been without it. It's going to add a little bit, but it's nothing that serious where drugs are going to change someone's whole completely. So I think it's the various things.
And I kind of agree with him on the GH is not a magic thing that's going to make you grow. It's definitely not. If you look at the clinical data, pretty much any increase in size as a result of GH cannot even be accounted for as muscle tissue. It's always just lean body mass, which could easily just be water, nitrogen retention or whatever. But there's no clinical data proving it actually builds legitimate muscle. But the fact is it can keep somebody leaner while they bulk up to that higher body weight that they're trying to get to, and in conjunction with the insulin creates a storm of anabolism that just wasn't available in the 70s, and I think that's more or less what accounts for it.
Training, nutrition, everything, genetics, so the whole makeup,
So in your opinion, you would tend to believe that, or you're stating that genetics, basically we're getting better genetics in the sport, which accounts largely or almost, that's the main reason that we're seeing.
I think so too, because the sport this day is much bigger than it was back then. So back then you only had a small group of people that did it, which was still a large number, but these days the group of people is getting bigger and bigger. More body types are coming into it, so you're seeing the more freakier type coming in, whereas back then, as you said, you say you only had 50 people doing it back then, now you got 200 people. Out of that 200, there's going to be maybe 2 or 4 freaks that come out of it. So you're going to
I love this pedestal thing with a dumbbell in the background. I just noticed.
You're going to see more people because there's such a varied type of physiques these days. Whereas now you've got a couple of thousand doing it now, or getting into the hundreds of thousands. You're going to have the odd freaks come out of the woodwork who just you look at them and you go, wow, what's he taking? But yet he's probably not taking hardly anything. Like you see those back in the in the farms, you see these homebred farm boys, they're massive. All they do is lift, bales of hay and all these sort of stuff onto the trucks and, work around the farm. But yet naturally, they're naturally big. If they started training, they could be a freak, maybe 5 or 6 years. So just I think there's more people into it now, so you're seeing the various types of physiques. So the larger number of people do it, the more people that do it, you're going to have more people coming out. But even now, when you look at the bodybuilding today, out of the top lineup of, say, 15 Olympias, out of the top lineup of Mr. Olympia contest, there's 15 people. You might only have 4 that are really you look at and say, wow, he's a freak. The rest have got great physiques, but yet 4 of them might stand out as being out of this world. So naturally people say, well, he's taken a lot of drugs to look like that, whereas, they're going to have that genetic freak in any sport. Like Michael Jordan in basketball, people can call him a freak for the way he can fly, get all those baskets, come into running. You got Ben Johnson, Carl Lewis, the times they can put in running, you know, it's just because they're built for that sport. So sometimes you're going to have people who are built for this contest, built for the sport, and so they're going to be the best at what they do. And then people are going to always label it, you know, drugs because no one else can do it, but yet they're maybe just built for that sport.
I see. Have you ever experimented with, or do you have a need to experiment with blocking agents of any kind?
No, I've never used them, never tried. Never really had the need to use them, so.
How about things like,
Well, he did say he uses Novodex pre-contest, so that would, I guess, qualify as a blocking agent, I'm assuming. I'm assuming he's referring to SERMs and AIs here, so yeah, he does use Novodex apparently, so it should be noted.
testosterone enhancing drugs?
No,
Nothing like that?
never.
So you have a very basic approach to this.
Even my training is basic, and I stick to the basic exercises. Diet, I've always stuck to the basics. I think that's where people go wrong sometimes. They might read magazines, listen to people and try and get too scientific, whereas, you know, weight training itself isn't really a scientific sport. It's like, you know, you do the hard work, you lift the weights properly, you get enough rest, you get the nutrition. Eventually you will start growing and see results, but people want it overnight. That's what they're making. Whereas bodybuilding and lifting weights is a long-term sport. It's going to take years before you might even put 10 pound on. You know, but people want it overnight, so they're going to take drugs and think, well, I'll take drugs, lift the weight, sit back in a chair, tomorrow I'll be big again. So it doesn't work that way. So if you expect that, you may as well not do it. You know, it's just stupidity. If you've got the time and you want to put the time into it, training, you know, you've got the dedication, that's all it takes is time. So you just got to sort of sit back and train hard and do the proper what you need to do. And if you're going to use drugs, do it sensibly, but just, you know, give it time. You're not going to, the more you take, you won't get any bigger. So it just comes down to sensible, really, and just, you know, go by what you believe in, because really most of the majority of people know what works for them, but yet they want to listen to other people too much. You know, there's going to be people out there going to lead you astray and everything, but it comes down to, you know, your own, what you feel inside, and you know whether it's right or wrong, or if it's too much. But, you know, don't go along with the crowd, just do what you feel is right for yourself. You see a lot of guys who do take heaps of drugs and go into the gym. They don't be lifting all these weights, but yet as soon as they come off the drugs, they're back down. You know, maybe to like 200 pounds, they go on the drugs, they blow it up with water to 250. Then that's it. Who wants to be like that? You know, you puff up, you go down. Then I see guys who are using drugs, and you look at me like, does he lift weights? And he's probably, he look like he's never lifted a weight in his life, but yet the least he'll give you what he's taken. So it just comes down to, like I said, it's more of a mental thing to me. Training's like I go by how I feel. If I feel strong that day, you know, some days I've benched 5 plates, 550, but I won't expect that every day. These guys do, and then they get injured. Like, I go by how I feel. If I go in the gym and bench 5 plates, that's great. If I go in the gym the next time to do chest and I get the 3 plates and it's heavy, I'll stop at 3 plates. You know, I listen to my body more than anything, whereas people are like, I did 5 plates last time, I'm going to do 5 plates again. So I get the 3 plates is heavy, add the weight on, then something's going to tear and something goes wrong. So it's like, that's one of those things you got to listen to yourself, really. It's like, it's an individual sport. Sure, you're going to have people that can help you train. You're going to have training partners. You're going to have people prepare you for shows. When it actually comes down to it, it's like you knowing your body the best. Whereas like in your sport now, there's people out there who say they can help you get ready for shows and this, but if you've been doing it long enough, you know what works for you, you know what gets you in shape, you know what gets you strong, you know what you have to do. So it's more like listening to yourself.
It's very refreshing to hear one of the, you know, the very, very top guys in the world stating simply that this is the way it is, that I don't use that much. In fact, I spend next to nothing compared to what some of these guys use. It's very refreshing to me, and I'm sure some of our viewers won't believe you.
Yeah.
Okay, like you said, but nevertheless, I want to thank you for coming here and sharing.
Comment down below if you believe him or not. Because I'm guessing there's going to be a lot that think he's completely bullshitting this whole thing. But, I don't know.
The reality of the issue.
Like I said, it's going to come down to a personal thing, but I just recommend if you are going to do it, and it comes down to your personal thing, think about it. If you are going to do it, as I said, start on a small amount. I guarantee you'll get the same results. Don't start on a large amount, and if the small amount works, stick to that, you know. Sure, the guy selling it might tell you to take more and more because he wants to get the money out of you, but, you know, you don't need it. It just comes down to how you feel. And then everyone's in the sport for longevity too, so you know, you want to be around to your 60, 70, you know. Who wants to win a show and age of 50 die, or age of 45 turn over and die, so that's not too healthy. So
most definitely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Well, that was pretty enlightening to say the least, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to think he's lying, obviously, but I don't know. Comment down below what you guys think. Obviously, very conservative use. One of the most insane physiques of all time, especially considering the use, and it makes you really wonder if even the guys who use excessive amounts even needed that much, or maybe he's lying. I don't really know. Anyway, that was pretty much my opinion on it. You guys saw throughout the commentary throughout. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplatesmoredates.com. Subscribe there. Check me out on Instagram at moreplates_moredates. Go follow Lee Priest on his Instagram and Facebook and whatever social media he has. Like, obviously this was a super value-packed interview there that I'm sure a lot of you guys haven't seen. And props to him for, not, being anonymous about it and just straight up telling it how it is. And can't really knock him for that. So huge props to Lee Priest. Go give him a follow. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe. Talk to you soon.